Now we've done all the math and the technique for making our setting triangles, corner triangles, and setting squares. Now I want to show you how you'll work that all together with the blocks that you've been making in the Learn to Quilt quilt. So in the Learn to Quilt quilt, the setting squares and triangles are going to be in the quadrants. So this is a quadrant. There's 4 quadrants in the quilt. We have our rail fence blocks. Remember, we made those in one of the very first episodes. Then we made our sampler blocks using the half square triangles and flying geese. And then here you can see the setting triangles, the setting squares, and the corner triangle up in the top. So in the quilt that we've been working on, this is the new colors. Here's my rail fences, setting my sampler blocks with the half square triangles, and then these are the setting triangles, a setting square, and the corner triangle. Now the first thing you need to assemble is you need to put the setting square with the 2 setting triangles. This is going to create a large setting triangle. So we're gonna, first we need to take our blocks. So I did the math. The finished size for this quilt is a 4-inch finished square. I did the math, and for my setting triangles, I've come up with a 7-inch block. Now I'm gonna cut it on the diagonal. So line it up from point to point. Cut it right down the middle. Then carefully lift your ruler without disturbing the fabric and just rotate the block. Now we're going to cut it on the other diagonal. And that is going to create our setting triangles. Now we're going to take those with our setting squares and make a large setting triangle. So you want to take the setting square and put it on top and line it up so that it is square with the setting triangle underneath. And whenever possible, try to put the bias cut piece, so in this case the setting triangle, on the bottom. The bias is stretchy, remember? So the feed dogs on your machine are always going to feed a little bit faster from the bottom. So when possible, put the stretchy or the bias part down on the bottom. So I'm going to sew this with my square on top, triangle on the bottom. I'm going to start, as always, with my little leader. I've got my machine set up with the scant 1/4 inch. I'm using my guideline here at the edge, and I've moved my needle over so I have my scant 1/4 inch. And I'm going to start sewing at the corner of the block. Stop, line it up a little bit, and go. When I get to the end, as always, I'm going to go and grab my little ender, sew off on my ender. So now I have assembled that one setting triangle onto the setting square. Let's press that. Very carefully when you press it, because it is a bias edge, just be real cautious that you remember that's stretchy. Just be cautious. Press that. Now I'm going to take and set my other setting triangle. This time, I'm not going to put the triangle on the bottom. I'm actually going to put the square on the bottom, but I'm going to line up the setting square and the triangle so the square edges are together. Going to sew all the way off. Pick up my ender. Now we can press that one, setting the seam first, carefully flipping it up because there is still a bias edge. And that's created our larger setting triangle, okay? Now we're going to assemble those with our rail fence. So going back to our quadrant that we've made, we're going to assemble the quadrant in rows. So the first row is going to be the bottom row that is going to have our large assembled setting triangle on the two ends, our rail fences, and then our sampler blocks. That's going to be one row. Our second row, so let me fold this down. Our second row is going to be our setting squares and triangles with just a rail fence. And then we're going to end with our third row, which is a corner triangle. So for the assembly of the top row, we're going to take the rail fence, a setting square and triangle with a setting square and triangle. So when you're assembling a quilt like this, you really want to start looking at the way the seams are pressed. So in this case, this seam on the setting triangle naturally wanted to go down on both sides. Well, it just so happens that when I created the rail fence blocks, they actually wanted to go down also. So now this seam intersection, both of those seams are going down. That's going to be way too bulky. I'll never be able to get that intersection to be really crisp if I have both seams going in the same direction. So what I'm going to do, this seam is going to my right. The one that goes on top of it, I am going to force that seam over to the left, and I'm going to butt them right together and pin it. So now when I sew this, I'm going to have that little seam be a little bit wonky, but it'll work out in the end, trust me. Go over and sew this. Now when I get to where my pin is, I want to stop and be very cautious, make sure that my seams are going in the right direction, and I am going to sew over that pin. All the home ec teachers in the world are now turning over, going, no, you can't sew over pins. Yes, I can. I can do whatever I want. Also, while I'm sewing this, I'm being cautious. I can feel the seams underneath, so I'm trying to make it so those seams don't get turned in the wrong direction. Let me grab my ender and sew off. Now I'm going to add my other side. Now this time, this seam on the rail fence is going down. This seam on the triangle is going up, so I don't have to do that little flip. I'm just going to match those seams, butt them right together, put a pin in. I don't want it to move on me. And I'm going to start sewing. I'm going to sew this time from the square side up, so I can watch those seams. So I'm watching those seams, making sure that they don't flip up as I'm sewing them. I'm going to position it and sew right over that pin. Just don't tell your sewing machine mechanic that Nancy said it was okay to sew over pins. If you happen to land on a pin, it can cause some timing issues. Just don't land on a pin and you'll be just fine. Come in with my ender. So now I'm going to press. Remember that funky one there that I had that little seam going in the opposite direction? I'm going to press that flat first. Give it a good steam. Now I'm going to press it up. Go to the other side. And now it's time to add my corner triangle to the top. All right. So one little tip I'd like to give you here is for adding the corner triangle, you really need to find the center of the corner triangle. So my favorite technique for doing that is to fold it in half, take a pair of scissors, and just nip just the tiniest little clip out of there. So then I know right where the middle of that triangle is. Right there I can see it. Now I'm going to take the middle of that triangle, line it up with the middle of my rail fence block, pin it in place, and again, I'm going to sew from the back side, that's the larger side, which kind of seems odd. You generally sew with the smaller piece on top, but in this case, I want to be watching these seams, making sure that I'm not flipping seams as I go, and because the corner triangle is stretchy because it's bias, that's going to help feed that through more evenly underneath. I'm going to watch this seam right here so it doesn't flip up. Grab my ender. I'm going to press my corner triangle up. So that's going to be row 2 and 3, and with the magic of television, you'll see how I've got my first row, my second row, and my corner triangle. In subsequent episodes, I'll teach you, or I'll talk to you about how you're going to trim these points here to make your quilt square before we put the borders on. But for now, this is going to get the quadrants of your Learning to Quilt quilt all finished. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We wouldn't want you to miss a single show. Please share us with your friends and leave a comment. We would really love to hear from you.